Hope you guys have had a good day so far, and thank you again for being here. It's been an enlightened weekend for me, that's for sure, because being a person who's done a lot of different manufacturers, raced a lot of manufacturing, different cars, my Porsche history is quite condensed, and it started again this year. And the picture in the bottom left there is actually the car that I'm racing this year for the Black Swan guys. They're racing today in the WeatherTech series. I'm doing the North American Endurance Championship with them, which is the 4 long races. So it was quite an interesting winter testing that car, learning about that car. First time I drove it was at West Palm Beach prior to going to Daytona testing. And that's actually one of the 3.5 minutes of good weather we had at Sebring this year. We had guys who were there yesterday here. Anyone there this year at Sebring at all for the 12-hour? It was absolutely disgusting. You missed nothing. We had 2 hours of red flag where we were just sitting there getting drenched, everything. It was awful. So it became a 10 hours of Sebring. And I ended up doing a stint in that particular car, which was 3 hours and 9 minutes. It was 4 stints in a row, which I wasn't ready for, but I did it anyway, and I did pretty good. So it was okay. So like I said earlier today, you've got to be fit enough to be ready to take those things on when they happen. And I'm getting a bit old now, so you question yourself all the time. But I think any of us that try to do these things that mean risk factors in life, you test yourself all the time, you question yourself all the time, and you get over that and you just push yourself harder. And I think that's seemingly what I'm doing. This top right-hand picture is me and Dale Earnhardt. And if somebody remembers at the end, and we've got like a minute at the end, I'll tell you the story behind that picture at the end. But somebody asked the question about it yesterday, which is why I'm saying this now. I will explain that. But so what are we doing? Little history about me. Somebody asked the question earlier about how did you get started in racing, and I said I'll go over that. It's quite different. Every single guy that I've raced with, every single one started racing cars in their teens, and that was late. Most of the factory drivers that I've driven with, of which over 20 now, different factory drivers from all over the world, they all started between the ages of 5 and 8. I was not lucky enough to do that. I didn't set foot into a race car and race. My first race, I was 27 years old. That's when I started. And I've been paid to drive race cars for over 30 years now. So it's kind of a weird deal. And it gives, I think it gives a lot of hope, in a sense, to guys that are coming out of college. They maybe started a job. They've all maybe dreamed of driving a race car or thinking they might have. And they go, well, I could actually do it. And I know people have come back to me in the last few years, over the last 10 years at least, people saying, I listened to you speak a long time ago and I got into racing and now I won a national championship, and the guy sends me an email and it's like, I thought it was way too late and I was completely past it. And when I listened to you, so it's good. I'm an old age pensioner and I'm still racing and getting paid to do it. It's pretty neat. So we'll do Porsche history. My Porsche history all the way up to the GT1 and the GT1 Evo, which is pretty interesting. And Jochen had to leave, unfortunately, but you heard the story. Part of it, obviously a huge part of it's Jochen. And onward, that 1997 year running that car gave me a springboard onto some way different things. A passion to help fix a tragic mess is I'm going to spend a little time on that. I have a foundation and I do traffic safety work. It's way more complicated than that. I could spend 10 hours talking about it. I happily spend 10 hours talking about it. I will give you, but I'm doing a lot of different things. I'm providing materials. I've done a curriculum for grade 4 through 8 students that's being tested in 2 states. There's a lot of different things I'll just tell you about quickly on that, because I think you'll find it interesting. The reason you'll find it interesting is because, one, you may have children of any age, you'll find it interesting. You may have grandchildren of any age, you will find it interesting. And also, we're out there on the roads, and you as well as I see the distracted mess that we've got going on. So I'll give you some stats and talk to you a little bit. I think you'll find it interesting. Plus, we have these on a table on the way out. As you leave, please feel free to take one. It has a video in there, which is actually a $25 video, so it's a little value added that these guys have managed to put together for you, and I'm happy to give you. For anybody, any child, any age, from 0 to 18, this applies to the parents. It's not about the kids. There's nothing wrong with the kids. We're not teaching them. It's the parents. So I'll tell you a little bit more about that. An unlikely friendship. Dale Earnhardt. kid from England, came over here in the early 80s. Unlikely friendship with a 7-time Winston Cup champion. You'll get a kick out of that, hearing a little bit about that. And then at the end, there's a Porsche story with a twist that I know you guys will like. If this was a GM audience, they hate it, and I can't tell the story, but you'll love it. So I've never been able to tell this story before, but I'm telling you guys, and it's going to be great. All right. I told the guys yesterday they liked it. So it's so 2 wheels are cheaper. Economics, racing economics. There was no chance that I could ever dream about racing cars. Well, I could dream about anything. But the bottom line was cars were out of my league. I thought, you know what? I had a passion for motorcycles. I had a passion for cars. When I was a little kid, I was absolutely fascinated with cars and motorcycles. I mean, I was sort of like, anybody that came to the house, we had a nice little simple car. Some of the friends would turn up at the house and they'd have a much nicer car or even a different car. And I'm like 6 years old and I'm like running after them down the driveway, basically saying, hey, can you take me for a ride in your car, please? And it's like, it's like a pedophile's dream, right? I mean, it's like this little 6-year-old running around asking complete strangers, can I drive in your car, please? So, but of course, back then we didn't even know what the word pedophile meant. We probably thought it was something to clean your feet. But anyway, so as Albert Einstein said, it's all relevant, right? I've always been a risk taker. Always been a risk taker. I was that kid. If I had a bicycle, there were no brakes on it. Do you think you can go down this cliff? Sure, Andy will do it. Andy will try it. Pretty much that was me. I should have been 6'6" and a lot wider, but I've just hit myself in so many different places and different ways. I never quite made it. Once upon a time, 2 wheels cheaper. So I didn't own a motorcycle, but my friends owned motorcycles when I was 18, 17 or whatever. So I got to ride them, but I didn't have one. So this picture is me in a backyard on my friend's TL125, which is all of 7 horsepower. I mean, you needed a crane to actually lift the front wheel, but I had a reasonable sense of balance and no helmet, which is great. And I do traffic safety work, Can you tell my whole life is like in conflict completely? So that picture is from the early days of On 2 Wheels when I got a chance to do it. As soon as I entered the workforce, which was out of college, I went into computer programming. That's my background, IT consulting. That's where I went to. And I was lucky enough to do that in the UK. Now, that, as soon as I started racing, as soon as I started work, I had an H1 Kawasaki, an H1B. For any of you that know motorcycles, it was a triple cylinder, 2-cylinder, 3-cylinder 500, and it had a frame made of plastic. It handled like a snake on greased ice. It was the absolute worst handling motorcycle. They called it the Widowmaker. It killed more journalists than any other production motorcycle ever, because journalists were used to getting on a bike. It would do 110 miles an hour, maybe down a cliff, and it would basically go straight. A Norton Commando had a pretty good chassis on it, whatever. This thing would get to about 125 miles an hour, and that was the end of the story, because once it started, once you get in a speed wobble, you got to go faster to get out of it, which sounds counterintuitive, but that's what you've got to do. Well, you're flat out, and when there was nothing left. And these guys, a lot of journalists, sadly, did fall off those things at well over 100 miles an hour. And of course, reading that as a 19, 18-year-old, I didn't get a new one. I got a second-hand one. I read about this thing in the early 1970s, and I absolutely wanted this bike. Because this is it. Evil written all over it. It's unrideable. Nobody can ride it. Journalists can't ride it. And I'm thinking, oh, well, I'm 16. I know I can ride it. So, and that's where it came from. It was just absolutely, it was my bike. So I'm riding this thing around the streets of Nottingham like a lunatic. And on the way to the Kawasaki dealership, because it was always breaking down because it was secondhand anyway, and I went up there and I passed a guy called Steve Henshaw. And I mentioned his name because he means an awful lot to me, and you'll explain why. I'll explain why in just one second. So I get to the Kawasaki dealership. Steve managed the dealership, and he came in, but I didn't see him come in. I didn't see him when I passed him on the street. And I was in the back of the shop trying to get my spares out of the mechanic, just sitting there, having a cup of tea. Steve gets in, I see him come in the back, and he's got a face on him like, I'm going to kill somebody, and it was me. And he basically, because he's a lot bigger than me, and he was older than me, and he grabbed me, and he put me up against the wall, and he said, you are an idiot. You are going to a racetrack, or you're going to sell that bike because you're going to die. I saw you, you passed me, you're going to get on a racetrack or you're going to die. Do you understand what I'm saying? And he raced, and he was a hero of mine because he already raced. He had a sponsor and he was racing motorcycles. And that's actually why I considered in the first place actually racing anything. It was Steve pushing me up against the wall and actually, frightening me to death, really. So with that in mind, I actually converted my street motorcycle. I decided that meant basically wiring up the drain plug, and that was it, pretty much. And that was it. I went on the racetrack. I didn't have a motorcycle to go to work on anymore. That was my bike to go to work on. It was on the racetrack. And I didn't have a van or anything. I did have friends who had a van. I would pay them the gas money. They would drop me off at the beginning of the race day, and then they'd pick me up at the end of the day if there was anything to pick up, if I wasn't dead or whatever. So that was it. So that was my first motorcycle, and I ended up winning races on that bike. It was very hard. There was only one other guy, his name was Tom Pemberton, who successfully raced that bike, and of course that was the guy I was going after. And I won a championship that year, he won a championship that year, and evil handling did not even cover it. It was fast. It was as fast as a 750. It was fast, but it had no brakes, chocolate tires. It was ridiculous. It was so dangerous. But I absolutely loved that bike. I absolutely loved that bike. Absolutely loved it. So things happened a little bit more. This is another complete mess. That's my buddy John Budge, who used to help me at the racetrack. He had a van. It was really good. He had a van. He used to drop me off, and that was it. I think that's his van key in his hand right there. Like, if you die, I'll talk to your mom and tell her that you did well. So that's it. But this bike was a KH400, and it was a national championship, kind of like Porsche Cup, right? So, but, the bike's smaller than a car. But this thing was a written-off motorcycle that Steve Henshaw, he called me up, and he knew I was racing my H1, and he said, "This will handle a lot better, but it is bent." It had hit a car, but it was only like $400. So I said, "Oh, great!" So I sold my H1 and I bought this piece of garbage, and it was a full-on national championship. The competitiveness was crazy. If you look up KH400 even on Facebook, you'll find KH400, and this bike was a crash bike. So I ended up running races. I ended up second in the championship in that year. And apparently, like 2 years ago, a guy called me on Facebook who used to race in that series. And we started talking about it. He said, Kawasaki hated you, right? And I'm like, why would you say that? That's so mean. It's like, no, dude, you don't understand. He said, you were winning races and you were on the podium consistently on a bike that was a complete write-off. It had a bent frame. It was completely trashed. It was scratched all over. Everybody else had nice, new, shiny motorcycles, and you were winning. And every time you got interviewed, you said, and this thing cost me $400, and anyone can do it, and it's great. And nobody was going to buy new motorcycles. They were looking for bikes in a breaker's yard instead of from a new motorcycle dealership. He says, you were their worst nightmare. I said, nobody ever told me. He said, well, did they give you anything? I said, no. He said, well, there you go. I said, did they ever talk to you? He said, no, they didn't talk to me, no. I said, well, there you go. Then I got this Yamaha. This was sort of the next step up. This was another national championship. I was sitting on the fence. This is Darley Moor, right? These places were disgusting. These tracks were absolutely deadly. This place was an old practice airfield place in England, and they had earth banks as the barriers. There were no barriers. It was earth banks because it was cheaper. And the crowd would stand on top of the earth bank. At the bottom of the earth bank, you'd hit it. It was crazy. The first, actually, if I go back to this one, that was at Darley Moor. You see the guy on the left at the top with the hood on? Behind him is an earth bank, and there's a very fast left-hander before this, coming into this hairpin, and I'm going around the hairpin now and out the other side. The first race I was in at Darley, I was on this bike, and it may have been that weekend, and I was coming into that left-hander. I was following it on a Ducati 750, and it was a really fast SS, 100-mile-an-hour fast SS. Then you did this left kink, and he lost the bike going into it, and he hit the earth bank, and I went past. His bike, was into the bank. He was into the bank, and I went by it. Essentially speaking, unfortunately, the guy into that left-hander, and he crashed. And an hour later, I found out that he'd actually passed away. And this was not an uncommon thing. 4 of my friends that I didn't know very well, but we'd all, people that I knew either from school or whatever, we all started racing motorcycles around the same time. And out of the, 6 total, but 4 closer and 6, 4 of them died racing out of the 6 of us. One, John Swingler, now lives in Brazil, and he had a massive crash at the Isle of Man. The same year he crashed at the Isle of Man, Steve Henshaw, my friend there, who got me into racing, he died in '89 at the Isle of Man on the same lap, 11 miles apart on that same race. Phil Meller, who was another one of my close friends, who the last time I saw Mel, we were both in an ambulance going away from Donington Park, being taken after both crashing in Donington. Motorcycle racing back then was absolutely deadly. It really was. As we lost a lot of friends, but it was an interesting mental preparation probably for all the racing for the rest of the time that I ever did anything, because you didn't have psychologists at the track, you didn't have counseling people, you didn't have crisis counselors there. It was just you felt really bad for the guy that died and his family, but then you were racing again 6 minutes later. You didn't stop it. It just kept going, and it was like you took the risk, you put the helmet on. Every time you put the helmet on, you knew there was that chance. So I don't want to be, it's not dramatic. It's nothing. It's nothing for us. It's nothing big. It's just life. Get on with it. You made it. You love to do this, or you want to stop doing this? Question yourself and then go. But don't make a big deal about it. And that was, it's maybe a British thing, but I don't think so. But that was the way it was. And as I say, that guy died. I didn't even know his name. I still don't know his name. But my friends I did know. And Steve was amazing, and he died at the island. John Swingler almost died at the island. He quit after that. And for me, computer programming and coming to the US probably saved my life. More than likely, actually. So I don't want to get too morbid about it, but it's just the way it is. It happens. You feel bad, but you keep going. Otherwise, just don't do it. Do something else. Go do something else that doesn't give you that, put you in that kind of risk, but that's the way it is. This is a simple statement. I bought a second-hand race car in 1984 and started racing. Very simple to say that. Not so easy to do. 1984, I was in El Paso, Texas. I'm sorry, I was living in Dallas, Texas at that point, and I found out about a second-hand Renault Cup car. The Renault Cup Series, for those of you who are old enough to remember, IMSA Renault Cup Series was great. It ran in 1983 and 4 and 5, and then it finished, I think, 3-year stretch. I bought a second-hand car at the end of 1983 and managed to start racing in 1984. I couldn't afford the car. I had $4,000 saved up. I was working hard as a programmer, whatever. And then I thought, you know what? Maybe this bank manager will help me, my local bank manager. And I was still actually living in El Paso, Texas. And I went to the local bank manager there, and I asked him if I could borrow money to put furniture in my apartment. And he said yes. And after I picked myself up off the floor, he lent me $3,500 for furniture for my apartment. And I was like, great. And my bank account now was $7,500. The car was $6,500. And so I went there and bought the car and everything else. Now I was a bit worried because a little bit of a white lie, but I thought, you know what? I feel okay about this because the car was street legal. I drove it back to my apartment. I thought, if he ever says he's coming over to check, I'll take the seats out of the race car and stick them in the living room, and then we're good. And we'll be all right. So I didn't feel too bad, and I did pay him back, and I didn't just skip town, but soon after that, I did go to Dallas, Texas. But that, there you go. But I did pay him all back. But that's how I started. My first race, then I moved to Dallas. My first race was in Riverside, California, and I live now in Dallas, Texas. And this race car was street legal. 30% of us doing Renault Cup races drove to the racetrack. I was one of that 30%. The other guys were rich. They had some kind of trailer, and that was it. So I drove on a Friday from Dallas to Riverside. That's 1,400 miles. Raced on the weekend in Riverside, then drove back and got back to work Monday night. And that, I was happy. I actually qualified 19th out of 51 cars and finished 9th. Won $500. I mean, a set of tires was $143. I slept in the car. There were 6 of us. We had 6 of us together. We had a barbecue pit, and all 6 of us slept in cars. Not together. We were in the, we were there in our own car. It was nice. And so that was it. Did I think twice about it? No, I did not. I was absolutely having a ball. I absolutely was having a ball. So that was Mecca to me. Winning $500, I never imagined in my life. So that was how I started. In 1984, I ran the whole Renault Cup Series on the West Coast. There was an East Coast and West Coast series. And ultimately ended up leaving my car at Mitch Wright's place out on the West Coast. And those of you that know Mitch Wright, he had a shop out in San Francisco area. And Mitch was kind enough to say, you don't have to keep driving to these races 2,000 miles each way. You can leave the car here. And I paid him like $100 a month for rent in his garage, and I could afford that. And that was it. So that's how I started racing, basically, guys. Here's a picture of my Renault appliance. We called them appliances, as it were, because it looks like a fridge, right? So that's why you call it an appliance. And it was great. It was all that Sears Point. That curb is a lot better now than it used to be. 1989 was decision time because I was getting paid to do a full-time job and I was racing full-time. Very difficult to do. I didn't have that many days off work, and it was impacting my work for sure. I couldn't do a great job of either. I had 20 grand saved up at that time, and I started a little IT consulting company with the $20,000. And I had two other partners come in at the time. They were silent completely. They knew me from racing, and they said, well, we think you might make a go of this thing. And they put in 30 and 30. So we started with 80 grand. That was enough for like 3 or 4 months, and that was going to be it. It was hand to mouth. The business took off like a single-engine Cessna with a misfire dragging an elephant for the first 2 years. But it finally made it over the trees at the end of the runway, and it's never took off huge because I never had the money to really put into it, but it's still going to this day, 27 years later, and I have 4 key employees that run it for me. It's little. It's only like 50 people maybe total, but it's allowed me to do all this other stuff, the racing full-time, getting my head into the racing full-time, and doing that, and now doing the traffic safety stuff, and also racing. What am I saying? Still racing, I guess. So everything I'd done initially was on street tires. Really, showroom stock was my background. It was all showroom stock stuff. Even so, some of the cars had 400 horsepower. That was a lot back then. They were all on street tires, street gearboxes. I learned how to save brakes, tires, chassis, setup, everything. I was doing Kelsey Hayes brake, for those of you that remember Kelsey Hayes brake testing in 1986. I ended up in a small pond at Moroso because of Kelsey Hayes brake testing, and I won't even go into that because I had 3 full brake failures at Moroso. And if you know how Moroso is, one end you go and you stop, there's no runoff. I went through a hole in an Armco, went through across the track on the other side, disappeared into the Everglades, and ended up in a swamp. But the car was okay, so it was good. And I mean, it was awesome. I made friends with an alligator and a snake and went on my way. It was awesome. But that's where it started. And I've done tire testing. I've done a lot of testing, new race car setup, production car setup. I was involved in the C5 production, C6 Corvette stuff, the Cadillac CTS-V original. I was running Road Atlanta backwards in the wet for GM because they wanted oil pressure numbers in the car going both ways. And I was like, okay. And so I was actually doing Road Atlanta in the dry and the wet, going the wrong way so we could see oil scavenging stuff going on. I've done stuff, it's not legal, most of it actually, but that we won't talk about that part. My first chance on slicks with enough power, 1991 Daytona, Tommy Morrison Cook Motorsports, and that car, this one. It's basically a ZR1 modified. It's still a production car, but it had slicks on it. It didn't even have a wing. It had a thing on the back that sort of said hi to the air as it disappeared over the top, doing absolutely nothing. But that was it. But it was fast. It was really fast. Top speed was, I don't know, it was a rocket. But it had no brakes. It handled sort of okay, but that was it. I mean, look at the size of those rear tires. They're ridiculous. So, and that thing's in the Smithsonian now. It's not on display at the moment. It goes into storage and then comes out occasionally, but I know it's in storage at the moment. But that's the only example of American GT car, and it has my name on the roof. And that made me incredibly proud, to say the least, when I knew it went in there, thanks to Tommy Morrison for doing that with Mobil Oil, actually, is how it got into the Smithsonian. And I should tell you at this point, being proud, coming over here the way I did and what I've done, I was very, very proud to become a U.S. citizen in 1998. So I am a U.S. citizen since 98, and it's something I'm very proud about. Then, of course, comes hanging chads. I live in Broward County, South Florida. The first time I got to vote was in 2000. Hanging chads, remember all that junk? Well, that was Broward County. I was there. That was my first time to vote. It was my problem. I did it, and I probably voted 6 times that weekend. That year. It was awesome. I was just catching up for lost time, basically. So it's all good. I've had a ton of racing opportunities, and somebody asked a question earlier about the different types of cars and which is your favorite. And when you've done as varied a number of varied things as I have, NASCAR being one. This is from the last NASCAR race that I did at Sonoma. This is Sprint Cup, and it's the only opportunity I got to do a Sprint Cup race. So this car, I got a phone call from a guy that was doing the sponsorship for them, which was Red Line Oil. They were a start and park team. Now, NASCAR doesn't talk much about start and park, but it exists, and it means they don't have the money to run the whole race, but they want to fill the grid, so they'll start it, they'll run a few laps, and then they'll park it, basically, and that's it. But they get the start money. The start money's huge, but you've got to qualify in. So this year, 2011, at Daytona, there were more cars to be there to qualify than could start the race. 36 NASCAR cars get a guaranteed start, the regular guys. Then number 37 through 43 is 1 promoter option and 6 spots for the people that are coming in. Well, at Sonoma, you've got all these road course ringer racers. You've got Boris Said, you've got Scott Pruitt, you've got Chris Cook, you've got a load of guys. Tony Ave was there, Mark Simo, Brian. All these guys try to get into Sonoma because it's the local deal, and it's a great road race. And obviously, it's not like it was 20 years ago. 20 years ago, the road course ringer guys, the NASCAR guys weren't so good at road racing. That's not the case anymore. They know exactly what they're doing. But these guys, their particular driver, who was good on an oval, he wasn't a good road course guy, right? So I got the call, and they said, great, can you do this? And I'm like, heck, I'd love to do this. This is going to be awesome. It absolutely was a dream to be able to do a Sprint Cup race. Thanks to Dale Jr., I'd done a couple of nationwide races in 2007, but I'd never done a Sprint Cup race. And I thought, oh, this will be awesome. So they said, we're going to test. And I said, great. I'll look forward to test at VIR. They always seem to test at VIR. Well, that didn't happen because an engine didn't come in. So I did not get to sit in the car or test the car at all. So I ended up getting to Sears Point. I didn't know what the practice thing was, but you get an hour and a half of practice time before qualifying. That's it. And obviously they run every week, so they're good with this. And the other road course guys that were there, they've run many, many times. I'd never sat in the car yet. So I sit in the car. I couldn't even, it was so uncomfortable, I can't even tell you. Whoever sat in it before me was 397 pounds and about 6 feet wide. And it was ridiculous. I had the pillows from my hotel room. I had the sheets. I had sponge. I had packing material just to stop me from sliding side to side about a foot each way. It was ridiculous. I'm like going, guys, I know I'm gonna have to get up to speed quick. I'm gonna have to be solid in the seat. So we just shoved everything in there. None of it fireproof, I'm sure. But it basically locked me into the car. And so I could, okay, I'm good, because I spent the morning trying to figure that out. Then we get our hour and a half practice session. I thought this should be fine. I go out there for about 10 minutes, and then the axle breaks. So I've had 10 minutes. I've done pretty much 3 laps, and then the axle broke. So I came in, I said, can you guys fix it? And they were working on it. They were really good guys. They were working on it hard. They got it done. I got about 15 to 20 minutes on track. I did no simulated qualifying. Qualifying with NASCAR, so I was just kind of learning the track, learning the car. It took me about 5 laps to actually get to full power. This thing had about 875 horsepower, chocolate tires, no brakes, and it handled like a pig. And it was tough to even, because Sears, you're never going straight, right? So, just even getting to full power on this thing was ridiculous. So, okay, I had my time, and I had no simulated qualifying. And I've done, it's ridiculous. How can you do this, right? So I get on the phone with Jan Magnussen, and I got on the phone with Ron Fellows, because luckily, I've got them in my phone, thank God. So I got on with Jan, and I said, Jan, I've had 20 minutes in the car, we did no testing, and I'm here, and I know you qualified 2 years ago, and you did the deal, can you help me out? He says, well, you're screwed, man. He said, come on, just talk me around a lap. Help me out. You know, I think I've got a feel for the car, and I know the track, so just tell me what I'm going to do in qualifying, because I've got no idea how this thing's going to handle on cold tires. So I said, all right, so you come down, you know, spin the tires up to the hairpin, get some heat in the rear tires, go around the hairpin. He said, then you're going to want to go flat out through turn 1, but don't. He said, you're going to be all adrenalined up, because you get on at 8, turn 8, you go out, go up the middle of the drag strip, turn 8, come down to the hairpin. You don't even get to do a full lap to warm the tire up. So your tires are stone cold. So the thing is, he says, well, if you spin the tires down to the hairpin, you're going to have heat in the rears, you're going to have nothing in the fronts. So you're going to push. So don't come killing it into turn 1, because you're going to push off the track, or you're going to push all the way up the hill. You're going to lose a massive amount of time. So I thought, okay, I got it. And then he said, blah, blah, talk me around the rest of the track. So we get to qualifying. And I'm ready. I'm going out there. I just spin the tires up, which is not difficult with 875 horsepower when you've got chocolate tires. So, I mean, I'm spinning the car all the way down there. The rear tires have got some temperature in them. I come out of the hairpin. I'm on it hard. And I turn into 1, and it seems to turn in pretty good. It's got some downforce, but then I have to lift a little bit. Then the front says, oh, you don't want me to grip anymore? Okay, I won't. Oh. And I'm going, Jan's voice in my head, whatever you do, don't push in turn 1. And I'm like, I'm pushing in turn 1. You idiot. And it's like all the way up the hill. I've got this thing, complete understeer. And I'm like, ah. So now a friend of mine told me after the fact that when I got down to turn 4, I was 7/10 below the bubble. I was 7/10 out of qualifying in, because Tony Ave was on the bubble. And I got down to 4, and I made it through. This is turn 7. This may actually be the qualifying lap. I don't even know. But the bottom line was I did this perfect. And this was a place where you could lose a lot of time, because the car is just so, it's just a pig. I mean, everybody has the same problem in these cars, but you've just got to get used to doing it. And it reminded me a lot of some of the old showroom stock cars, to be honest, with a lot of horsepower. And so I got through here really well, and I'm very quick through 8, 9, 10. I've always been really fast through there. I like fast corners, and I got it through there pretty good. Hit the hairpin good, hit the braking, didn't get the axle hop thing, went through there, came out, and went across the line. Total silence on the radio. So you go back, you come in, you go around the back, and then you see all the cars lined up. I was the last car to qualify, and they still weren't saying anything. And then I get to the back, and I see Tony Ave parked in front of me, and I see Tony throw his helmet in his car. And I went, oh. And then I get a thing on radio, hey, son, you made it. You're in the show, boy. You're in the show. And I was like, yeah, I figured. I just saw Tony Ave throw his helmet in his car. And I felt bad for Tony, because he's a hell of a good driver. He does Trans Am now. He does a great job. And I don't know him well, but I know he's a good driver. And he had all the sponsors and all the car painted, and I felt bad. But I didn't feel that bad. But anyway, so... That's my little NASCAR Sprint Cup story. Oh yeah, somebody asked yesterday, was it you that said, where'd you finish? I finished 26th on the lead lap. I was actually the highest placed road course ringer. And I should probably tell you the story of the last pit stop, right? Yeah, that's pretty interesting. We were in the race, and I was doing pretty good. We were actually running in the top 5 lap time-wise once the tires got 15 laps old. The car seemed to have a good setup in the mid-late run. And we got a yellow with 22 laps to go, and they were running about 24, 25 laps on a full load of fuel. So it was like, this is perfect. This is great. And I got on the radio and basically said, this is a yellow. We've got 22 laps to go. This is going to be perfect. And I said, great, guys. I'll come in. This is going to work great for us. And there was silence on the radio again. They didn't talk very quickly, these guys. But then he came back and he says, well, son, we ain't got no more tires. Honest to God. We ain't got no more tires. You stay out there, son. You're doing great. Well, at Sears Point, if you don't have new tires, and these guys do, you're 2.5 seconds off the pace. It was bad. And I went, oh, God. So on the restart, I think I was like 9th or something in line. Oh, it was just drive on the mirrors. Don't get slammed, hit, or anything. It was murder. Everybody passed me. It was awful. I didn't get hit. I probably dropped back to 35th out of 43. And then everything equalized, and then I started picking people up, and the car came back to me. Even with the old tires, I was picking people off. I ended up 26th, and it was actually Chris Cook was behind me. We were 1st and 2nd in the road course ring as I beat Boris. I tell everybody I beat Boris because I love Boris. We're good friends. But anytime you can beat Boris in a Sprint Cup car, it's good. It was good. It was really good. So it wasn't bad. I was on the lead lap, so it was fun. Done Pikes Peak before it got paved. That was awesome. That was the year I did it in an RX-7 to an RX-8 turbo. Great stuff. Finished second twice at Pikes Peak. I never won it, but second twice was pretty good. And the trophy's enormous. I don't know if you, the trophy's like as big as this thing here, and it's a plaster cast of the mountain. And they give it to you. I mean, honest to God, you can barely carry it. So I said, can you send it to me? And I mean, it arrived 6 months later. I mean, it was like probably cost $50 to send it to me, but it was great. It was a great event. I mean, again, an amazing opportunity that I got to do that place 3 times. Getting up at 3:30 in the morning is no fun, but that's the way it goes. I've had lots of factory rides, lots of different manufacturers. I'll tell you a little bit at the end just to explain which manufacturers, but this was a pretty amazing Le Mans. 2001 in the Corvettes. It was the wettest Le Mans they've ever had. And it was so bad at night in the rain, you couldn't see anything out of the front windshield. And you've heard the stories before, but literally we were running down the straightaway. They cut a bigger hole in the driver's net, and you can see down, and you were looking at the white line at the side of the road to know if you were on or off the racetrack. That's how bad it was. It was absolutely awful. And they didn't stop it. They just had pace car, followed by pace car, followed by pace car, but they didn't red flag it like they did at Sebring this year. But it was, talk about a mental game. I mean, you're doing 180 miles an hour, 170 miles an hour, absolutely pouring rain. And the car's aquaplaning. You're hitting puddles in various places. You know where they are after a while, but the car's completely aquaplaning because the rain tires are very, very good, but they can't deliver all the grip you need and get rid of all the water at those speeds. But as you can see, it was just that's the kind of spray you're looking at. And we're not doing 12 miles an hour there. We're on it because everybody else is on it. There were some massive crashes that year, massive crashes. I guess, like I say, we're not very smart, right? We're not that smart. So Porsche. My first contact with Porsche actually was when I was a teenager in England, and it's actually a guy in my local village. He was a butcher. He owned the butcher shop, and his daughter was named Porsche. And really, that was my first contact with Porsche, really. But other than that, we won't say too much more about that, really. I think the papers are sealed. And so the first time I sat in a Porsche was a friend of mine's dad. He had a second-hand 911E, which I got right yesterday. And I think it was like early 70s. And he had this old 911, and he came to the house. And again, I said, oh, that's a nice car. It's better than my dad's. Can I sit in it? Can you take me for a ride, please? I was 6 years old, 22 years old. Didn't really matter. I was getting in strangers' cars all the time. And he took me for a ride in this car, and that was the first thing that hit me about the car was the noise. The noise was just like, this doesn't sound like anything else. And it wasn't particularly fast, but it was way faster than anything that I'd sat in. And I mean, I was racing motorcycles at the time, but it just sounded so different. And that was my first tuned ear to think it's a flat 6. And he told me it's a flat 6 and et cetera. It was a pretty interesting experience, which I never forgot. Never forgot that car. It was awesome. So at the top, there's a little sarcasm there. It's like, I know that there is no Porsche, there is no substitute, but for me it was like, Porsche, there is no way I can afford this. Yes, I know, thank you. So that's the truth. I mean, the idea of Porsche back then, I didn't know anyone who owned one new or anything, but they were, even back then, they were just, aspirational vehicle. Not that we said that back there, but that's a new marketing term, right? An aspirational vehicle, absolutely an aspirational vehicle, and still is, and something that's amazing. I was lucky enough to, am lucky enough to have a GT3 in my garage right now, so that's what I actually have. It's my own personal car, so it's amazing. And Porsche didn't give it to me. It's not like, because I'm driving for them, you get one. I'm not quite one of those factory drivers, that's for sure. So my first Porsche that I ever drove was a race car in 1995, and it was Larry Schumacher who owned the team. And I got a phone call, and it was Sebring, 1995, and Larry called me up and said, hi, we used to run some showroom stock stuff together in the around that time, like 93. I knew Larry from that. And he just called me up and said, hey, I'm running a Porsche. Would you like to help me do the co-driver? Jeff Perner was the other guy in the car. And I had a great time in the car. And I was, it seemed, because it was less horsepower than the Pontiacs I'd been running in other series, but it had more grip and it was lighter. It just felt like a dream to drive, because you could get on the power. The tires were good enough. You didn't spin the tires up particularly. It was just so nice for me. Remember, I'd never driven go-karts. I'd never driven Formula cars. I'd done showroom stock. So this car had slick tires. It was lightweight, and it had just enough horsepower to really feel good, and it sounded great. And that was, it was like, wow. And it was a huge step up for me even to get into that car, which was a GTU car back then. So in 1996, I was racing Porsches in the US, and a lot of things happened in 1996. I'd got some good results with Larry. We ran some races in 95, and I was getting phone calls. And some of the phone calls came from teams that were running the BPR series that was just talked about earlier. And Raw Racing. Sorry, I just got lost for a second. So I was racing a lot of different Porsches for a new hardware team, the Rook guys. And that's one of the times I met Tony in 95, was through Larry Schumacher, and then in Europe as well. Tony and I got to see each other over there. And Jochen Rohr. And he was very kind enough to let me use his GT2 Evo car. And that car was the car that actually I ended up running for the first time in a World Challenge race in Elkhart Lake. And I ended up winning that race, first time out in the car. There were a couple of other good cars there. There was a Callaway running and another Porsche with Martin Snow was another car. But there was good guys, and Salim was there. But I ended up winning the race, and that ended up, little did I know at that point, that would be the car that we were going to run Daytona with the following year in 1997. But that was that same car, and that was my first time in that car. Now that car, it wasn't the GT, it wasn't the GT3 car with the less horsepower motor. That thing had the twin turbo, and this was my first time in a turbo car. And I'll tell you what, holy moly. It was just so fast to me on the straightaway. It handled reasonably because I'd done showroom stock stuff. You kind of pointed it towards the end of the straightaway, and it kind of got there. It was a bit vague at high speed, and it was a bit vague turning in the fast corners. There wasn't a huge amount of downforce, but remember, I'm going from showroom stock to a little GTU car to this thing, and I thought it had loads of downforce. That wing and the front, it had downforce to me. Now, if I got in it now, it would be totally different. But back then, it was just like my eyes were wide open all weekend. It was just an awesome chance and an awesome experience, and then ended up winning that race. It was great. So 96 had opened some racing doors. Rook Racing asked me to drive in selected World Championship races in 97, including Le Mans. And at pre-qualifying, what I told you guys earlier about pre-qualifying, I ended up being on pole at pre-qualifying in 97. And in that last 8 minutes, so it's the first time I'd ever tried to qualify at Le Mans. It was the second time that I'd ever been there, and I'd never used Michelin qualifying tires before. And I just managed to do a lap, that you just dream about. And Olivier Beretta and Jean-Pierre Jarier, the Formula One guys, were on first and second. And right at the end of the day, it was like 5 minutes to go, I bumped him out and ended up getting pole at Le Mans, and I've never forgotten it, and it was great. We ended up finishing second at Le Mans that year with that car, but that qualifying lap was something else. I actually can't remember anything about the qualifying lap really at all, going back thinking about it. It was one of those moments. I wish I could remember it. There's no video of it, but I did the lap, and there it was. And Jean-Pierre Jarier came down to our pit and starts talking to Fabien Rook like, who the hell is this guy? It was pretty funny. An F1 guy bothers to come down to my pit and find Rook and says, who's this Pilgrim guy? It was pretty funny. And he went, he's nobody, don't worry about it. And this was the car we did it in, So it was superb. It was so much fun. I got to race in Brazil with that car. I got to race in Europe with that car. I got to race in China with that car. I mean, it was so much fun, and I was very grateful for the Rook brothers to give me those opportunities. And Tony was part of that team, which was just amazing. Tony was there. It was incredible. So 1997, Jochen Rohr gives me a phone call and said, let's do the whole year. And it was like, wow, this is going to be awesome. So we started 97, as I said, in the blue and white car, the one that we showed you earlier. We won at Daytona. and then second at Sebring. And I put that in for Jochen, no wave by, because he was apoplectic, because with not about 45 minutes to go, there was a yellow. We were stuck behind a prototype, and behind me was the leader of the race, and they gave us no wave by. They mistakenly took the prototype in front of me as the overall leader, and it wasn't. We never got the wave by. If we had got the wave by, I'm absolutely convinced we would have won the race, because the car that won the race was going slow, not because they were so far ahead of us. It was because they were slightly damaged from a crash they'd had, and they were going slow at that time. They'd been super fast the whole race, but they had damage, and we could have got them, and we didn't get the wave by. Jochen still believes that was a total conspiracy, but I'm not sure. I think I'll put it down to just incompetence myself. But either way, we didn't get the wave by, but a first and second for the first 2 races of the year put us in fantastic position. And August, and this is significant for my whole rest of my racing career, really. In August, while we were both leading the championship, both Jochen and I were leading. Don't get it wrong. Jochen did more than half the season. He was my teammate. And, with long races, we had other drivers, of course. But Jochen and I ran together in several races, and we won. Well, we were on the podium. We didn't win any of those, but we made podium. We were hanging in there in the top 3, 4, 5. Jochen did a great job. There's gentleman drivers, and then there's other gentleman drivers. And Jochen was really quick, and he was really good. He was a great teammate. But he made this decision that he would step out of the car, like I said, misspoke it, but the most unselfish decision that's ever been in my racing career, and I'll never forget it for sure. And he stepped out of the car. He bought the Porsche GT1. That was one of the decisions. He bought the Porsche GT1. It shocked me, it shocked the crew, it shocked everybody. And most of all, it probably shocked his wife when she found out how much it cost. But he bought the GT1. Decided he would give up his seat and put full-time professional drivers in for the rest of the season. So here's some great pictures of the car. So you can see the dive planes actually are a little different on the car. A gentleman was asking me earlier about all the dive planes. They were, and I thought there was one. There were 2, and you can see they're a little bit different, but there they are. So some of the pictures show the car with no dive planes, the little ones at the front. The little ones at the left front there is what I'm talking about. And then they have this picture clearly shows it. So then, in 1997, Allan McNish shows up. I didn't know who was going to be my teammate, for the rest of the season, but Porsche Motorsports obviously had something to say about this. And Allan shows up, and I'm just checking the time again. There we go. We're good. Allan McNish shows up. Well, I didn't know who the hell Allan McNish was, and he certainly didn't know who Andy Pilgrim was. So I actually thought when he came in the shot that he was Jochen's small child. But it was like, no, this is Allan McNish. He's really good. And then I did some research, and somebody said, he's F1, dude. He's F1. This guy's been testing the McLaren. He was testing McLarens when Ayrton Senna was running McLarens. And I'm like, wow, this is awesome. So for Allan, who'd also been testing the GT1s and other things, so he was fully up to speed on the car. And what a great guy. He was just so great. And so we talked. And at Pikes Peak, first morning, he didn't know who the heck I was. He probably thought I was a gentleman driver, whatever. And then in the first sessions at Pikes Peak, neither of us had ever been there. And I was actually faster than Allan in the first practice sessions at Pikes Peak. And it was like, and he was saying, who the hell are you? And he said, it's like, who the hell are you? I said, you're pretty good. And I was like, well, it's fine, thank you, mate. It's all right. We got a race weekend to run, and let's go for it, and this is going to be fun. And we became firm friends after that, and we're still firm friends. I ended up going to his wedding. I ended up ruining his relationship he'd had with 10 years with his girlfriend before he met his wife. And I mean, all kinds of great stuff. I mean, it was awesome. Yeah, just ask Allan about how good Andy Pilgrim was for his social life when he came to America. Then he'll probably either walk away or he'll burst out laughing, either way. But you're welcome to ask him about it. Allan and I had a great friendship, and we ran together successfully at Colorado Peaks, Sebring. But let me tell you about Allan. Once he got used to this car and this setup after that first session, he showed his talent. I mean, what a great talent. What an amazing person for me to try and follow, try and look at his data. This is an opportunity people don't get. I was nowhere near on top of this car like Allan was at the beginning of this deal. Once he got up to speed, I learned from him. But remember, I'm coming from showroom stock, a Renault appliance, to a Firebird, to a GT2 Evo, and then to this wonderful, amazing car with real downforce. And that takes commitment. I was carefully finding the limits of this car because my ears were ringing from the very first moment at Motorsport this car arrived, because Jochen got very close to me and whispered in my ear at about 300 decibels, "Don't crash this car. Do you hear me?" And I was like, yes, Jochen, I understand. Don't crash the car. Thanks, mate. Got it, clear. So the point for me was I put my ego aside. I learned from the data. I worked up to the areas where I could, and this is a lesson for any driver, but it was maybe being older was where this was at. We won doing this. I didn't crash. Allan didn't crash. And it was just looking at his data was monumental. At Sears Point, when I ran with him in '99, we were running an Evo car. Do you know turn 10 at Sears? It's really fast. As you turn into turn 10 at Sears Point, Allan was basically losing the car, the back end of the car, 3 times before the apex. His hands were so fast on this car, because for him, driving this car was like driving a rental Cadillac. It was. He was so on top of this car. For me, I had to work up to that, and I got there. But it was like, don't look at the lap times, learn from this guy. You're never going to get a better opportunity than learning from a guy like Allan McNish, and I did. And I'd done that every car I'd ever driven when I drove with guys that may be better than me or faster than me, whoever they were, you learn. And it was the same all the way through my career. But so many guys that I know that got opportunities to get in cars or be with teams, when they saw a guy going faster, they made an error trying to get there too quickly. They crashed the car, and they never made it. And their careers ended right there. So maybe because I was older when I started, I benefited from that. I don't really know. But we had an amazing, amazing time. There he is. He does a great impression of a tomato, doesn't he? That was us winning somewhere, but I don't know where. But we just had a great time together, and he was an amazing guy. Some nice pictures of the car on track here. It's just a beautiful car. It's just a gorgeous car. The car's beautiful. I mean, it's just a beautiful car. And again, Tony, there's Tony, see, on his back, on the floor, under the car. And that's where he'd been all night. Brian was actually just waking him up, say, "Tony, wake up, carry on. You know, it's morning now." So that's pretty much where Tony's comfortable and does his best work, I'm sure. Video. So I was doing some camera work at Speed Vision on a show called On Track. Some of you may remember. It was kind of a fun little show. And I did some pit reporting stuff for them when I was at the races where I was racing, and I just do stuff for them, and it was kind of fun. They were very nice, and after the end of the season, in '97 I'd run with Jason Priestley in a Mustang, which was great fun, and they put this whole compilation for the year together. I'd completely forgotten about this, but I was trying to find some Earnhardt video to show you guys, and I found this video, so check it out. Hopefully we get audio.
Andy Pilgrim has reached many milestones in his professional racing career. Throughout the years, Andy has amassed 37 victories in 6 different series and has a race complete streak of 106 through the '97 season. That's an incredible record which dates back to his last DNF at Watkins Glen in June 1992. Undoubtedly, though, 1997 was Andy's best season to date. He clinched the Professional Sports Car GTS1 Championship before the season ended and helped Porsche secure the GTS1 manufacturer's title. To win a championship in a class as competitive as GTS1, you need wins along with consistency, and you need a team and team owner who's behind you 100%. That's exactly what Andy had with the 01 team and owner Jochen Rohr. The year started out nearly perfect for Andy as he drove to victory in the season-opening Rolex 24 Hours of Daytona. Consistency throughout the year kept Andy in a heated battle for the title. Then, on August 31st, Christmas came early when team owner Jochen Rohr purchased a brand new GT1 Porsche. Teamed with veteran road racer Dorsey Schrader, Andy took the yellow 01 to victory in its debut race. Next stop was Las Vegas on September 19th. Again, the Rohr Porsche went to victory lane, but this time, Andy had a new co-driver, European hot shoe Allan McNish. This wasn't an easy win, as Andy and Allan had to fight hard against the Doc Bundy Ford Panos. But in the end, it was win number 2 in race number 2 for the new car. The Professional Sports Car Series continued a week later in Colorado at the Pikes Peak International Raceway. Again, Allan McNish shared the driving with Andy, and again the new dynamic duo went to victory lane. But this win had special meaning for Andy. It gave him the points he needed to clinch the GTS1 title, a fitting reward for an awesome season. But the season wasn't over. Next stop was Sebring, and again it was the Ford Panos giving the Roar Porsche all it could handle. But the Panos made a costly mistake with this shove, and sports car officials decided to drop the Panos from the top spot, giving Andy a 4th straight victory along with Allan McNish.
Just to say something, Tony mentioned a story. I've already mentioned that Allan was so on top of this car, and my respect for him is huge, obviously, not just because he was my teammate, but you look at his resume, it's incredible. 2007, I ended up getting an opportunity to drive the Corvette C6R at Motorsport, and with Ron Fellows. It was his last race, actually, in the Corvette. They brought me in for it. I hadn't driven the Corvette in 3-4 years, and they brought me in for that, which was a great honor. Motorsports like Ron's home track and all the rest of it. And as usually happens when these things happen, the Corvette was now on Michelin's. I'd only driven it on the old crappy Goodyears. They were really bad, and that's just, you know, that's just nothing against Goodyear at that time. They were 15-year-old technology, and the tire wasn't very good. We had good tire for about 15 minutes of a stint, then you were just sliding around. So I'm got to be at Motorsport, and I'm basically, I get no practice time at all, none. It's like, that was it. It was just the way it was. And every time I've done maybe 3 laps, and I'd been out on warm tires. And at that time, the Michelin tire was really, really, really tricky when it was cold and when it was brand new. Well, on the race, when Ron was going to do the first stint, I was getting in after Ron. I was going to be out on brand new Michelins, stone cold in the middle of a race. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to call my mate Allan McNish, because he knows how to warm up Michelins better than anybody else. So I called up Allan, and I told him the story, told him what was going on. I said, how do you warm these things up? Because I'm going to be out there, first time on new tires, it's the middle of the race, I've had no laps, help me out. And he's like, oh, no problem, I got that, okay, no problem. Okay, here's what you do. So you're in the pits, you get in the car. When they drop you off the stand, you just basically, you just rev it and stuff it, just dump the clutch, just spin the hell out of the wheels, okay? The engineers hate it, but screw them, okay? All right, so you spin the tires down the pit lane, you spin it again, going down, you just kill it, kill the rear tires, you'll have some grip, you have some speed, you have some heat in the rear tire, okay? Now, anyone know Motorsport? Does anyone know Motorsport? You come out of the pit lane, and your turn 1 is a downhill, off-camber, 120 mile an hour entry, all the way down the hill, off-camber left-hander. It goes probably a full 90 degrees, and it's wicked, wicked turn. So, he says, so accelerate top of turn 2, and then when you go into 2, you know how it goes over the top there? Just give it full lock left, but don't brake. And I'm like, don't brake. No, don't brake. Just stuff it in. Give it full lock. It won't turn immediately. It won't turn, but you just give it, it will in a minute. Halfway down the hill, it'll like heat up the fronts, and then it'll grip, and then it'll turn, okay? You'll be good. And so then he gets to the bottom of the hill, and he's fine. You'll come out turn 3, good. A little slippery in turn 3, because you've gone, you know, nothing really. And then you go that 4. You should be good by turn 4. I said, thanks, Allan. Great. I'll do just that, yeah. And then I got off the phone, and I went, good God. And I mean, obviously I didn't do that, and I made it, and you know, Ron and I finished 3rd in that race, and we finished. But that phone call I will never ever forget, because it emphasized everything I knew about the guy. It's absolutely unbelievable talent. So there it is, the man himself. So Laguna Seca was the last race of 1997. Sebring, we'd already won the manufacturers and the championship. We had a bit of a shunt. There was oil in turn 11 at Laguna. I went off, and actually got the car fine. I got it, I went off, caught it, went off, was just turning around in the mud at the end, and then a Porsche came around, hit the oil, and wasn't quite, and just started spinning right towards me, and he just slightly hit the driver's side. It didn't really damage the car much, but it scratched it up a bit. And Jochen basically decided, because we were doing an Auto Week deal on the Monday morning after the weekend, Jochen decided, because we had nothing to gain and he wanted the car pristine for that, he decided to park it for the weekend, which was fine. I mean, it's just a deal to do, and which is why you get the car in great condition now, and it is perfect. But the guys made sure it was perfect for the article, and here's the article. There it is, Feel the Roar by Sam Moses, and it was in Auto Week in January 1998, January 26th, I think it says there. And it was a fantastic article. He's a really good writer, Sam Moses, and it was a super article for those of you may remember some of it. So people are like, what's it like to drive? You know, I've had so many questions on this car when I was running, like how's the gearbox, how fast is it then, does it have turbo lag, how much is it? I mean, did you get hit by a paint truck? That was the paint thing, you know, some people have a sense of humor. I think the paint looks good, by the way. But you know, to answer the questions, Jochen, don't crash. I mean, that was a huge thing. But I got up to speed eventually, but I just did it in a way that made sure that I was under as little risk as possible. But the car was amazing. The biggest difference was the downforce. Getting used to that downforce, getting into a corner where you knew in any other car I'd ever driven, I would have just been sliding straight off the racetrack, and this thing just turned a corner. That was a huge leap. And it's fine in a little formula car, and you spin around, and you know, you could probably do a little bit of damage, but this thing was $1 million car, and I made sure that I got up to speed as reasonably as possible. But man, on those first times when I went through the quick corners really quick, it was just amazing. But that was the biggest thing that affected me, was the downforce. And the other thing was the carbon brakes. The carbon brakes were different. They are full carbon. They do not work when cold. You have no brakes. And that was a massive change. So warming those brakes, keeping them warm in a yellow, getting them warmed up after a pit stop, I mean, they cooled down immediately. So you had to get them up to speed and understand that on a restart, you had to be careful. On the start of the race, you had to be careful. You couldn't get enough heat in them. That was a real tough learning curve. And so many people crashed with carbon brakes. Really good drivers would crash with carbon brakes back then because they would cool down so quickly and they had basically no brakes. I mean, it was just incredible. I mean, I really mean, like, you put your foot on, and it's just like on glass with oil on it. It's like, oh, God. And then they come in eventually, but we're talking seconds till they come in. It's freaky when it happens and you've forgotten a little bit. Oof. I mean, I had to miss some back ends of some cars early on. I freely admit that, but I didn't actually hit anybody, thank goodness. The power, familiar but stable. The thing with the GT2 Evo car, it was all over the place. I mean, at 650 horsepower in that car, it was twitchy all over the place. And this car, when you pointed it, it just went. It was beautiful. You could pinpoint this thing to an inch on the track, and it was like, wow. It was such a beautiful car, such a great car to drive and race. And it did move around. And Allan would talk about that. He said, you know, once you get it going, you're going to be there. It'll move. Don't worry about it. You can catch it. It's okay. I mean, he gave me a lot of help. He said, you will be able to catch it. He says, you're good. You're okay. You'll catch it. And sure enough, yes, when it did snap, you could catch it. But the faith, I just wanted to make sure that I understood when it did that for the first time, I understood how quick it was going to do it. And that's it. And but he was right. The car was, you could slide the car around, believe it or not. It wasn't all about being stuck to the track. It actually does move, and it does understeer, and it does oversteer. But it was just getting there, and the higher speed corners just took a bit. The big gearbox came out of a cement truck or a bulldozer. I'm not sure which. It was H pattern. It was absolutely industrial strength. I called it a 48-hour gearbox. Brad Kettler called it industrial strength, and absolutely it was. It's an H pattern. When they put a sequential in the car, it was 4/10 faster immediately, and that's not with no lift shift. So it was 4/10 a lap just with a sequential box, the forward back, but not with no lift. No lift shift added on. It's almost a second faster just with that gearbox change. It was definitely old technology. It's incredible. Just with the gearbox change, or second a lap. You pay millions for a second a lap in a lot of types of racing. Driving off the turbo sound. When it started, when you heard it spool up, you heard it start to whistle. was when it started to build power, and I learned to be ready for that. So you'd gas it full, but when you started to hear the noise, you just modulate the gas a little bit. You pull out about 20%, so you take the hit quite out of it, especially if the tires were getting a little warm or get a little older, and you drove off that. And it was, again, once you got used to it, once you understood that was going to happen, it was just beautiful to drive. I mean, it was just really, really nice. And we've already told you the little tire story. That's my favorite picture with me and Allan. That's in 1999 at Portland International Raceway. That was the last time we drove together with Porsche. I was invited in. His regular co-driver was Bob Wallach and couldn't get in for that race. He was doing something in Germany, or I don't know what had happened, something, whether he'd injured himself or something. But Allan picked me, which was a huge honor. The last time that I'd driven with him was 97, and they asked him, he said, "Hey, can I drive with Andy Pilgrim?" And those two races were Sears Point and Portland International Raceway, and we drove together again, and it was a huge honor any time to drive with him, because he was just pretty special. I'm just going to talk quickly, and again, I want to get on to, we're doing fine. We're good. We've got 20 minutes, great. And I have a foundation that does traffic safety, and I'm going to run a little bit on this. Giving back is just in my genes. I'll not talk so much about that, but it came from my mother and my godmother, essentially. I got taken to charity events when I was a kid, and it just stayed with me. So it was just when my business was going okay and my racing was going okay. I'm not a rich person, but I mean, I was doing okay. And my mom always said, when you get to a point in your life where you're comfortable in any way, see what you can do to give back, see what you can do to help others, because people are, there's always people around you that are going to need a helping hand, and never be too busy that you can't help someone who might be in need. That was just her mantra. And she also said, don't, basically, if I was ever being a little bit arrogant in her mind, she'd basically tell me, like, you should try to be more humble, young man, because you have a lot to be humble about. So she would keep me in line pretty well. She was a very well-spoken lady. So I started to give back. It was the mid-90s, and traffic safety for 22 years now. People think it's teen driving. It's not. It's nothing to do with it. I'm a very lateral thinker. I was in computer programming for a long time, and my specialty was fixing things, troubleshooting. That was sort of my specialty in that area, and traffic safety is no different. We have a massive problem, and there are ways to fix it, but it's never going to be through legislation. There are problems we have that are related to politics and economics, and I'm not going to go into too much detail with this, but the bottom line is we have a distracted driving epidemic in the United States, and every single person here who drives has seen people using their smartphones, looking at their smartphones, doing all this stuff. It's an absolute nightmare. So in 2015, we've got statistics for the first 6 months of 2015, and traffic deaths are up 14%. That's the biggest increase we've seen in 70 years, guys. 70 years. We've never seen an increase like that. Injuries are up 30%. Costs, property damage, medical is up 25%. This is a banner year. My own personal feeling is, yes, we've got cheaper gas prices. Yes, we have an economic recovery, if you want to call it that. But we also have total saturation of smartphones. We're now at 200 million smartphones. I think the total saturation of smartphones has caused this thing it was the straw that broke the camel's back. That's my opinion. You may or may not hear about it when we get the real numbers for the year. But again, I don't want to go into too much detail. I just want to let you know that this is an area that I spend 80% of my free time doing this now. I've got educational materials all over the place. The driving test is a complete joke. It's not doing anything. Parents are the ones the kids learn their driving skills from. So when the kid watches the parents from about 2-3 years old, when they start paying attention, I tell parents, when you turn that child's safety seat around to face front, that is when your child is learning distracted driving habits and behaviors from you. So be aware of that, and don't do it when your kids are in the car. Essentially, that's what I'm talking about these days. And creating educational materials for parents. I have a curriculum that's being tested in Illinois and Vermont that's for grade 4 through 8 children. Basically, you teach the 9-year-old to recognize distracted driving when they see it. Where do they see it? They see it in their own parents. Remember when we tried to stop parents smoking by telling the kids that smoking was bad, it was going to hurt your mom or your dad? What's the difference? Nothing. The parents need to understand that they are polluting their own children. And that's what I do. I speak to parent groups. I speak to elementary schools. The older elementary school kids get it. middle schools and high schools and driver ed teachers. So again, I don't want to belabor this, but if you're interested to know more about it, and it's just me and my foundation, I work with NHTSA in Washington, D.C. All my stuff gets looked at by NHTSA because I send it to them. It has to be. I can't just have what I think is a good idea and start showing it to parents and kids about this. So the traffic safety packets, the education packets are back there. Please take one when you leave. Yeah, I'll show one up. Please take one when you leave, guys. It's there, and I'm not really going to say any more about it. I have a new video, Realities of Driving Today, which I just finished. That's on YouTube. Go have a look at it. That's what's now being shown to students. 5,000 parents have actually, 5,000 driver ed teachers have already downloaded it. It's free. All my stuff is free. As long as I got money to do this, I'm going to give the stuff away. I've had 50,000 driver ed teachers grab my stuff. So it's working, but it's small. I'm just trying to make it bigger. It's good. I love doing it. I don't care, you know, if there's nothing in the bank. I'm going to keep doing it because I really enjoy it. So I'm going to move on to, and I'm going to not run these videos. You can see any of these videos online, whether it's the Parent Driving Zone, whether it's Realities of Driving Today. But I definitely want to make sure that you see the good stuff because we want to get to an unlikely friendship, and I don't want to rush that part. You've seen a little bit of my so-called odyssey into motorsports. There's one story that stands apart in how unique and special it was. Sadly, it ended too early. This all started at Petit Le Mans 2000.
So Andy Pilgrim, it is on his shoulders to see, can he pressurize Carl Wendlinger? So much more experience has Carl Wendlinger from his Formula One and a sports car background. Boy, it is hard to believe at the end of 1,000 miles of racing that we have so many battles going on so late in this race. It is Tommy Archer in the Viper. Tommy Archer versus Andy Pilgrim. Oh, this is good. Good stuff here.
And guess who's coming?
The GT battle is still being led by Masson and Wallach.
Yeah, but
here's the leaders.
And they're going to catch them in the next 2 laps or so. If not this lap, they're going to catch there's the leaders right there.
3 laps to go.
Oh, look at this.
Look at the Viper, blocks him. Oh,
Inside.
the brake zone. The brake zone for turn 1. Ah, Pilgrim goes down the inside. The Viper's off.
He's going to have a good save so far.
He tried to stop the move by the Corvette and he wasn't strong enough. And now the boys can celebrate. It's not over yet. He's got 2 more laps to go. What a boxing match this has been at the GTS. There go the leaders.
I don't think they even touched. I don't think they got together.
No, but he could see him coming down and he braked later than he dared and couldn't make the corner. Man, hang on to your hollyhocks here, boys. Let's join the celebrations. Andrew?
Andy Pilgrim, Derek Daly just said that was a dynamite pass that you made.
It was a pass for sure. I kind of psyched him out the lap before, so I kind of stayed all the way left, and he was in the middle of the track, and I don't think he thought I was going to do it. And he braked late, and I just dived it straight inside. We came together down there a little bit, and I'm not sure he went off, I think, but I was already past him, so it was then or never because I knew the LMPs were coming, so I had to do it then.
Thanks very much. Let's go to the booth.
That particular pass got onto RPM tonight as the pass of the week. I didn't know any of that. I had no idea. But this is why I ended up getting a knock at my front door after Petit Le Mans. This was like on the Tuesday, and I was sitting in my office at home answering emails. And I received a FedEx package, and it came from Mooresville, North Carolina. And I'm sharing these letters with you guys for the first time. This is the third time that this is shown. I showed this for the first time at the Corvette Museum 3 days ago, and then yesterday to the group yesterday. These letters are 15 years old, and they've never been shown in public, and I felt 15 years was long enough. So I'll read them to you, because you may not be able to read it. Basically, this is the Tuesday after Petit Le Mans. I just wanted to drop you a line and congratulate you on your victory at Petit Le Mans at Road Atlanta. That sort of drive and determination is exactly why I want you for a teammate in the 24 Hours of Daytona. That last lap looked like something we do at Bristol. If I can adapt to these high downforce Corvettes like you've adapted to rubbing fenders, we should be able to skin some snakes come February, and that's obviously the Viper is a snake, right? Best wishes. I look forward to seeing you here on October the 17th. Dale Earnhardt. And that letter came to my, I knew who Dale Earnhardt was. I had no idea what he was talking about. And I had a minder and a manager. I know it wasn't a fake. So I called my manager at GM, Gary Claudio, and I said, I was excited, doesn't even cover it. just in case it was right. But I'm older, right? So I'm going, this may not be true, this may not be true. Just calm down. So I get on the phone with Gary and said, Gary, I just got a letter from Earnhardt. And he was like, oh, that's why he wanted your address. I was like, oh, you knew about this? It's like, well, thanks for telling me. And it's like, he said, well, there's a bit of an issue here. October 17th, that's when you can talk about it. And 2 weeks away. Are you kidding me? So I said, no. He said, no, you've got to wait because we're doing a big announcement October 17th in Mooresville. You're going to be there. You and I are going. And it's like, great, this is going to be awesome. But you're kidding me? I couldn't say anything to anybody for 2 weeks. He swore me to secrecy, which sucked, essentially, really sucked. So there it was. So we went to Mooresville, and Gary and I were there. Gary's GM guy, he's running the Corvette program, and he was there, and I was sitting there at the back of the room. There were loads of chairs, probably about as many chairs as are here, actually, and at the back there where the tables are and the GT1 cars, there was like loads of cameras. I mean, loads of media. The Corvette was here, and a Camaro SS, an Earnhardt edition Camaro SS, was over here, both of them covered up. That's what we were there for, both of the unveilings, if you like. So Gary and I sitting at the back of the room, would be way back there, and the hordes of photographers were in front of us, and then suddenly they started swarming to the front, which would be the podium here. And from the back, which would be over here, I guess Earnhardt had some secret way to come in, and the people had seen him. Now, he'd won Talladega the day before. This was Monday. He'd won Talladega the day before. So I hear at the back of the room, I hear them say, Andy, where's Andy? And Gary's like, oi, he thumps me in the ribs and says, oi, that's you idiot. He's asking for you. I was like, oh, right. So I stood up and I went towards, this way. He's coming that way, arm outstretched, handshake, solid handshake, looking me straight in the eyes. And he goes, God, it's good to meet you, Andy. And he basically said, hell of a job you did at Road Atlanta. That pass on that Viper was something else. And I'm like going, thanks, Dale. You did really good at Talladega, too. It was awesome. Great. He said, yeah, I don't want to talk about that. And then he grabs me like this. He just puts his arm around me and he goes, do you guys know who this is? Did you guys see that pass this guy made on that Viper at Road Atlanta? And I'm like going, I'm in Mooresville, North Carolina. There is no way on God's green earth anyone's going to know who Andy Pilgrim is. There's not a chance. And I'm like, and there's some little guy at the back goes like, is that Andy Pilgrim? And it was like, and he goes, yeah, it's Andy Pilgrim. And then he basically goes off about this whole Road Atlanta thing. And people want to talk to him about Talladega, and he didn't want to talk about it. It was just incredible. And he's got his arm around me, and he's talking about me to these photographers. And I'm thinking to myself, I got Dale Earnhardt as a PR guy right now. It's unbelievable. It was an unbelievable moment. And he was absolutely humble. He was a real guy. So from that was the first moment. And I have a lot of Earnhardt stories, which sadly we certainly don't have time for. But there was at the 24 hours. It's a great picture of I started the race. Dale was getting in after me, and then we were going to go from there. Dale Jr. was there as well, and my teammate Kelly Collins. I got Kelly involved in the program, and so here's a little bit of video.
It's time for Dale Earnhardt, his own self, to think about getting in the car. That's not the helmet design we're used to seeing on the Intimidator.
No, especially for this race, and it's a handsome looking thing.
It is a handsome looking helmet, isn't it? Yeah, beautiful.
As ever, an open face helmet.
Well, you have to have an open face helmet so you can do that intimidating. You can't intimidate very well from a closed face helmet.
We should say there are rumors that Dale may have been doing a little bit of intimidating in the sessions. See the view from the car he now waits for. It was an exciting first hour. We'd like to take you back and give you a look at some of the highlights as the 39th Rolex 24 at Daytona unfolded. This is the car that Dale Earnhardt will get into when it pits, but it'll be a couple of laps, we are told, before that happens. Working the beginning of the infield part of the road course into the Rodriguez curve goes Andy Pilgrim. His co-driver is waiting. Dale Earnhardt will get into the car shortly, and we'll see what he can do. A very familiar racetrack, a very unfamiliar car. Dale Earnhardt, the 7-time NASCAR Winston Cup champion, will make his much-awaited debut in the race. Calvin Fish
Well, Andy Pilgrim jumped out, but it took him some seconds to do that. Typically, the drivers loosen the belts as they go down pit lane. There you can see Dale in the car, crew member helping him get the lap belt done up. That's the key. If they sit on the belt, then they have problems. Dale's sucking it in a little bit. They're trying to get that connected. Then they'll tighten down those shoulder belts. The team has gone to work. All 4 tires have been changed, and it takes about 33 to 34 seconds if they're on schedule to get the fueling. The fueling has been completed, so again, as we mentioned, the driver change may cost them a few seconds. Not too bad. Dale fires it up. First time in it. Oh, stalls it momentarily. Even he's a bit nervous with all his experience, guys.
You know, it's going to be tough on your right foot. Just do the best you can, but the times you're doing are great. Stay off the line, buddy. Stay off the line, but the real slippery place, I'll tell you 2 places. Come out totally inside. Stay off the gray patch on the exit of the first horseshoe. The other place is the exit off the bus stop is extremely slippery when you come back onto the normal oval track. Right where you come there, it's like dished. It collects a lot of crap in there, and it's extremely slippery when you come back to the left and come back up to the wall. Those are the only 2 real tricky places. The rest of it, just stay outside and do the best you can. And the tires, the rain tires are very good.
Before Andy, gotta fill up if I'm going too slow with Kelly in the car, whatever.
So what he was saying there is, he says, if I'm going too slow, put Kelly in the car or whatever. Took about 3 laps for him. Now remember, it started raining, and that's why I was on the radio, because he was asking, do I need to drive anything different? You know, give me some info, put Andy on the radio. So I got on the radio and was telling him where he needed to drive to stay, get off the slippery stuff. But after about 3 laps, because the Corvette was very different for him, just like me getting into that car, the downforce, the braking was very, very unfamiliar to him. When it started raining, the car was sliding all over the place. Earnhardt came into his own. He was running exactly the same lap times as the GT guys that were out there. Within 3 or 4 laps, he was comfortable. He didn't even want to come in. He was doing full stints, two stints. He was doing a great job, and he continued to do a great job. There was never even, we weren't going to take him out anyway, because NASCAR fans would have killed us, but the bottom line was we didn't need to take him out. It was absolutely awesome. So after the race, we'd had a great time, and this had been 5 months basically since I met him, and a lot of things, a lot of stories, a lot of fun stuff had happened in those 5 months. We'd become very good friends, what you would call pretty much an unlikely friendship. And it was again on a Tuesday morning. He was very good with following up with these letters, and another letter arrived, and I'll read it to you guys. That's him and Dale Jr. We were talking on our way home last night. We both wanted to tell you how much we appreciate everything you and Kelly did for us. That's Kelly Collins, my co-driver. We want to thank you for the neatest experience and most fun either of us have ever had in our combined racing careers. We realize what a sacrifice it was for you and your team to undertake the whole program, but your support and guidance through the whole experience has been overwhelming. We can never repay you for everything you've done for us. Hopefully, we'll be able to come up with a way to settle the debt somehow. I would like nothing more than for us to be teammates again someday and claim a victory overall for ourselves. We finished second, by the way. Andy, Andy, I was a huge fan of yours as a driver after the Petit Le Mans. After getting to know you through our conversations and testing and finally the race, I'm a huge fan of yours as a person. I'm proud to say that I consider you one of my best friends, and I'm confident will remain so for many years to come. That didn't happen. It was really important to me to be involved in this and to be part of such a historical event. More importantly, becoming friends with you will always make the event mean so much more. In my book, you're world class, Dale Earnhardt. That letter's 15 years old. I waited 15 years just because I'd showed it to very, very few people, but I'm proud to say that I'm okay showing it now to you guys. I hope you appreciate it. It's a piece of motorsports history, so. I've been very fortunate, as I said, to drive with these factory teams over the years now. It's, again, starting at 27 years old, it's just been an amazing run. Corvette, BMW, Porsche, Cadillac, Chrysler, and Pontiac over the years. Amazing factory teams, factory-supported teams, and full factory teams. World-class drivers. I mean, Terry Bootson, Bob Wallett, Bill Oberlin, Ralph Kellner, Stefan Ortelli, Patrick Long. Currently, I'm with Pat Long on the team I'm running now. Bruno Eichmann, Ron Fellows, Johnny O, of course, Jan Magnussen, Kelly Collins, Boris Stead, Frank Free on IndyCar, Nicky Katzberg, an absolutely stunningly fast GT driver right now that I'm running with the GT3 Porsche, the GT3R, Oliver Gavin, Max Pappas, Manja. There were others. Hurley Haywood, the Archer brothers. I mean, there's so many more. Incredibly fortunate. I feel so fortunate. You know about my career a little bit. That was already said. I've been fortunate to win a lot of races, whether it was me racing by myself, whether it was with teammates, championships by myself, championships with teammates. Incredible, really. But I have to say, you know, people have asked me this a lot. People ask me all the time. It comes up a lot. Why do you do this? Why would you risk your life? What is the point? Especially as old as I am now, right? I don't have a simple answer for that. I don't. We now have a Porsche story to end with, guys, a really quick Porsche story, and Tony has graciously said, just keep it going because, you know, as long as you want, but I'm going to be done soon, Tony. Thank you, mate. Porsche story with a twist. Now, March 2014, Barber Motorsports Park. Auto Week magazine, Camaro Z28, Porsche GT3, the new one, the new 991, very early on. 18 magazines, TV shows had been to Barber Motorsports Park over a 2-week period by invitation by General Motors. I was there to test the GT3 for Auto Week magazine with Johnny Wong, who's one of their journalists, and I was there to test the car as well with him. So we got there. Barber Motorsports was selected. It was obviously going to be a really good track for the Camaro. Absolutely no doubt about it. It was picked. The Camaro was running on Trofeo R tires, really soft tires, and it was a great handling piece. There's no doubt about it. 75 grand. It's a phenomenal track car. It is. They did a great work to it. But up until that point, the Nismo GTR, the Turbo, the Porsche Turbo S, the new one, and other cars had run against this Camaro, and all of them had lost. Randy he'd got within about 1/10.5 of a second with a GTR. I think the Turbo S was maybe 2 or 3 tenths slower. But bottom line is, out of all 18 and 17 journals, people, guys like Randy who can drive like hell, they'd all basically lost out. The Camaro was batting 1,000 basically, and we got there with a GT3. Nobody else had managed to get a GT3. We got a GT3. Now the GM guys, I told the marketing guys, I'm running for Cadillac. I'm a full-time paid factory driver for Cadillac. Have been for a long time. And I told the marketing guys, I said, hey, can I do this thing for Auto Week? You know, running the Z28. And, you know, they said, whatever you bring, we don't care. Bring whatever you want. You know, you can bring. This is what they told the magazines. So I said, you know, we're going to be running a GT3. I'm going to be driving both cars. Are you guys okay with that? They said, absolutely. It's going to be awesome. Great. Well, okay, cool. Great. So everything's set. So I end up there. I've never been to Barber. Never been to Barber before. I've never seen the place. And you don't get many laps in these cars, you know, because once you just don't in these events. It's funny how you get 5 laps maybe if you're lucky. So I've got to learn Barber quick. So I did a few laps in a rental car. And then I got the Z28. And I got within 1/10 of Randy's time. So I was about 1/10 off Randy. And I thought, that's good enough. Randy knows Barber like the back of his hand. He does this stuff on Motor Trend all the time. I'm okay with that. That's a good time. And again, stick the ego in your pocket, right? 10th is a 10th. It's not that big a deal. So I was happy. So then we get into GT3. Every engineer that was there, and there were a load of them, got on pit lane. They got in the starter stand. They had stopwatches. They were on it. They were so excited that somebody brought the GT3, the conquering, the crown jewel was there to run against the Z28. And I was driving the GT3, a factory GM driver. Yeah, 7/10 faster than the Z28. 7/10. And I was like, oh, that's it. Yeah, it was a pretty twitchy lap. I can tell you it was twitchy. I went in, I don't know if any of you know Barber, but there's a point where you have to come along this straightaway, you turn in hard right, and then you drop over the top of a hill, and the back end just let it go. It let go. And I had the nannies on the lowest setting. Thank goodness I did. Because, I mean, I was on it, but I thought this thing's going to go around, and we had major lock. And so the nannies caught it right at the last minute. I had good lock in it, and it set down, and it caught it, and I caught it, and it just set, and I was right at the apex with like a 5-degree slip angle. I went, oh yeah, that was perfect. And I just flew over the top and down, and it was a good lap. But it was twitchy. The car was twitchy, no doubt about it, because it was cold. It was like March, you know? It was cold. So everything's good. The marketing people knew about it. I was happy. Monday morning, 8 o'clock. I'm in the bathroom getting ready for whatever I'm going to do that day. I get a phone call from GM. My boss at Cadillac. What in the hell were you thinking about going 7/10 faster than the Z28 at Barber? What the hell happened? And I was like, you guys knew about it? He said, I didn't goddamn well know about it. And it's like, well, dude, go talk to your marketing people because they knew about it. They were all happy about it at the Detroit Auto Show 8 weeks ago. They were saying how much we're looking forward to you driving the G28. So don't talk to me about it. He says, man, this is serious. Don't mess around. I said, I'm not messing around. It was bad. It was bad. There were calls made. Mark Royce was involved. Everybody was involved. Apparently, it just went all the way up the chain and back down again. Jim Campbell was involved. It was like, whoa. Anyway, and now I'm driving for Porsche. That is not the reason I'm not driving for GM. I have absolutely no complaints on the driving side at all. I drove for them for a long time, but it was an amazing story. It got sorted out eventually. But what happened was, big company, marketing people did not tell the manufacturer guys. They did not tell Jim Campbell and the guys that they should have told. And so that was it. But I got off the hook. I was pretty good. They hired me for another year or two, so it was good. But there you go. Nice story. That picture came to me 3 months after he died from a photographer called Andy Hartwell. And I saw the picture, and immediately I saw the picture, I said, I know exactly what this moment is. And it's been used a lot in other articles. 10 years after he passed away, 3 articles were written, big articles were written by, oh gosh, it was a big media outlet. This picture was used in one of those, and they interviewed me for the last article out of the 3. Tony Stewart was one, and somebody else was another, and then I was the 3rd one. And this picture was used in that. At the end of the race, I did almost like the last 3 hours of the race to finish it up. We finished second, like I said, and there's no dishonor finishing second in 24 hours of Daytona. But you finish second, you think you could have finished first. Like this year, we finished second again, 3 seconds out of the win in the Porsche. We were the highest placed Porsche this year. But, you know, so I was walking down pit lane in my driver's suit, and, you know, I'd already got my jacket on because I'm always cold. So bottom line is Dale was walking the other way, and he gets about from me to John away, and he's got his hands in his leather jacket pockets, and he goes, are you tired, boy? And I went, nah, I'm not tired. I'm good. I'm all right. And he just keeps walking up to me, and then he puts his arm around me just like that, just at that moment, and I know exactly what he said, and he whispered in my ear, he says, second sucks, don't it, son? And that's exactly what he was saying in that picture. And then we went about to the podium and everything else. But that picture, it was very special to me. Guys, thank you so much. I know you want to see Tony. Thanks very much.